Yesterday, I did a story about Brazil's insurrection, Brazil's version of January 6th. Today, we're going to talk about Brazil, but we're going to talk about how U.S. lawmakers want Bolsonaro, who is the quote-unquote Donald Trump of Brazil or the tropics, deported. They want him deported. Let's get into it. U.S. lawmakers want Bolsonaro deported. Congress Democrats compared the former Brazilian president to Donald Trump and accused him of inciting violent riots at home. This piece of garbage, this Donald Trump wannabe, like everything the U.S. is, Brazil wants to be, from their president / head of state to their own movements, the insurrection movement. Democratic Congress members have urged U.S. authorities to extradite former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro to his home country. Absolutely. Prosecute that son of a bitch. After his supporters stormed government buildings in the capital, Brasilia, on Sunday. Bolsonaro has reportedly been living near Orlando, Florida, since December, when he fled Brazil and refused to participate in the ceremonial handover of the presidential sash to his successor, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Speaking to CNN's Jim Acosta, Texas Democrat Joaquin Castro called on the White House and local authorities in Florida to consider sending the quote-unquote dangerous Bolsonaro back to Brazil. He's not dangerous, but his ideology and what he stands for is, well, maybe you can then classify that as dangerous. Nevertheless, he does need to be extradited and deported back to Brazil. Bolsonaro, quote, should be extradited to Brazil, Castro told CNN, describing him as an authoritarian who used the, quote, Donald Trump playbook to inspire, quote, domestic terrorists to try to take over the government. His message comes after thousands of Bolsonaro's supporters marched through the Brazilian capital on Sunday, the Brazilian capital being Brasilia, for those who didn't know, claiming the October presidential elections were compromised. Very much the same accusations here. They copied the playbook to a T. Here in the United States, you had Trump supporters claiming that the elections were rigged and compromised here, that the votes and the voting system was rigged, that it wasn't fair and honest. Absolute bullshit. They copied the playbook to a T, these Brazilians. The demonstrators who insisted that there were a number of voting irregularities in the election, just like I told you, to a T, ended up storming the Brazilian Congress, Supreme Court, and presidential Planalto Palace, leading to violent clashes with police. There were not violent clashes with police. If anything, you had Brazilian police and Brazilian military working with them. So there was only one incident in which I saw the protesters attack one police guy on a horse. Other than that, they were clapping and the police were actually speaking to them. I saw videos and photos of this. So no, there weren't violent clashes with police. There was just one isolated incident. The police were helping them and the military were helping them. They were supporting them before they arrested them. Bolsonaro has repeatedly denied having any involvement in the unrest, insisting that he only supports peaceful demonstrations, which are, quote, part of democracy. Newly inaugurated Brazilian President Lula da Silva has repeatedly referred to his successor as a genocidist, which he is. Absolute piece of garbage this guy is, Jair Bolsonaro. While the Joe Biden administration and other U.S. officials have compared him to a former American President Donald Trump. No, he wants to be Donald Trump. He's not Donald Trump. He wants to be. Badly. Quote, he basically used the Trump playbook to inspire domestic terrorists to try to take over the government, Castro told CNN, claiming the Sunday protests were reminiscent of the January 6 Capitol riots in 2020. New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has also weighed in, writing on Twitter that the Brazil protests were the same as the fascist movements allegedly orchestrated by Trump when he refused to concede the election to Biden. Similar views were also expressed by Representatives Mark Takano from California and Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, both of whom called the riots an attack on democracy, which they were. President Lula, who was in Sao Paulo, was forced to declare a state of emergency in the Federal District of Brasilia, appointing Justice Minister Ricardo Garcia Capelli to lead the, quote, federal intervention. That's the federal intervention to herd the protesters like cattle, which they are. By Sunday evening, after hours of clashes and hundreds of arrests, riot police managed to regain control of the government buildings using tear gas and water cannons. Police announced that at least 300 people had been detained, and the justice minister warned the arrests would continue throughout the night as authorities tried to identify everyone involved in what he dubbed as an act of terrorism and an attempted coup. Good article. Props to Russia Today for this one, RT. What do I feel about this? I feel absolutely this piece of garbage, Jair Bolsonaro, needs to be deported. He needs to be prosecuted in Brazil. Just like the Trump supporters who stormed January 6th need to be prosecuted, but have been handled with kid gloves here in the United States, unfortunately. They've been coddled. They've been cradled. And hopefully that doesn't happen in Brazil. Brazil has a history of far-right military intervention politics. And so, unfortunately, they have this monster, this fascist monster hanging and looming over them. And so this is before Jair Bolsonaro, who himself was in the in the Brazilian military, and who is a stalwart for the Brazilian military. And so even before Jair Bolsonaro entered the equation, Brazil has had a problem that it needed to deal with, this fascism problem, this far-right extremist problem that it hadn't handled prior to Jair. And so when Jair came into office, he only ignited that fervor and, made his supporters feel as though that's what Brazil needed to be. Another military interventionist, domestically, a country that is ruled by the military, a far-right extremist, fascist government that needs to rule forever. And unfortunately, you have at least half of the Brazilian population who believe this, just like here in the U.S., where you have half of the U.S. population who would love a far-right fascist government to rule over the U.S. forever. And even though we do kind of have that, the Democrats are weak. They're a right political party. Yes, I said a right, not a left, a right political party. The difference is they're a right political party. The Republicans are a far-right political party. And so this country, unfortunately, has been ruled by rightist governments from both the Democratic and the Republican parties. But yeah, he does need to be deported. Final thoughts: deport this piece of garbage. Hopefully, Lula da Silva prosecutes him and his supporters to the fullest extent for trying to create an insurrection. Not trying to create, they actually did create an insurrection. And for trying to want to be Americans here in the U.S. so badly. These Brazilians are, they can't even get an original idea and thought of their own. They had to copy from the U.S. and its playbook. But let me know what you guys think. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Should Jair be extradited back to Brazil? Should he face prosecution charges? What do you guys think about this whole insurrection that happened yesterday? And if you're listening to this on the podcast, tweet me. Let me know what you guys think there. Peace.